While I'm working on Yandere Simulator, I constantly get ideas for new features. There was a point in time when I would eagerly announce or implement every new feature that came to mind. However, sometime in 2016, I realized just how much work I had created for myself by promising so many features, and I decided that it was time to stop planning any new features beyond what I had already announced. Of course, I remain determined to keep every promise I've ever made, but I've avoided making any new promises for quite a while now. There are two exceptions. If we discover that the game has a major design flaw and the addition of a new feature would solve the problem, then I would most definitely consider adding that feature. And the one other time when I'd be willing to implement a new feature is if I can think of something that would add a lot of extra value to the game at the cost of very little time and very few assets. For example, a rival elimination method that could be added in less than a week with no new 3D models or animations required. That's exactly the sort of feature that I'm going to talk about today. There's no guarantee that the feature I'm about to describe will actually make it into the game. I just want to make a video about it because it's been on my mind since 2014, when it was first suggested. This idea will only get into the game if a lot of people really want me to add it. And if you hate the idea, don't worry, because it will be a completely optional part of the game. It starts with the delinquents. The delinquents who exist in the game right now are just statues who stand there to represent a concept and communicate an idea, like the placeholder club leaders. But one day, they will walk around just like the other students, and the player will be able to talk with them, do favors for them, and befriend them, just like everyone else. This is where my idea for a new feature begins. If the player can do a massive favor for one of the delinquents, he will owe Yandere-chan a debt that he cannot possibly repay. Instead, he will connect Yandere-chan to someone who can repay the favor. Yandere-chan will be able to meet the delinquent's older brother, a man who was involved with organized crime, drug trafficking, organ trafficking, human trafficking, kidnapping, assassinations, a man who specializes exclusively in the most dangerous crimes. I imagine that he's part of an organization. He's not at the top, nor is he at the bottom. He's somewhere in the middle. I imagine that he has a boss, but also has people working for him. I haven't given him an official name yet, but I've been calling him the Yakudza. If a small town or street is added to the game, Yandere-chan would meet him in an alley. If the final game doesn't have a town or a street, then Yandere-chan would communicate with him exclusively through text messages, exactly like InfoChan. And much like InfoChan, he would offer a menu of services. He would provide everything that is too outlandish for InfoChan to be able to acquire, such as illegal weapons and hard drugs, both of which could be used to eliminate rivals more easily. The first favor he provides to Yandere-chan would be free, as payback for helping his younger brother. But afterwards, if Yandere-chan continues to request his assistance, he would expect to be paid for his services. Paid with a special form of currency: fresh human bodies. Yandere-chan would follow the usual process of befriending someone, leading them into a storage room, tranquilizing them, putting them in an instrument case, and then transporting them out of school at midnight. But instead of taking them home, Yandere-chan would meet up with the Yakudza and hand over the victim. After delivering enough victims, the Yakudza would be willing to perform a favor. He could provide drugs or weapons, but he could also assist in the elimination of a rival. In exchange for enough bodies, the Yakudza would be willing to kidnap one of Yandere-chan's rivals. Afterwards, her organs would be harvested and sold on the black market. Or perhaps she would be smuggled to an Eastern European country where she would meet a very morbid fate. The player would never see firsthand exactly what happens to the rivals that are abducted by the Yakudza. The most you would see is a text message confirming that the deed is done. Some things are best left to the imagination. Each abduction would cost more than the last one. The Yakudza would charge an absurd price to eliminate the final rival, Megami. But although it would be costly, it would still be an option. Through the Yakudza, Yandere-chan would be able to eliminate Megami without ever taking a step near her. Yandere Simulator will have multiple endings. The ending that the player gets will be determined by multiple factors. One of those factors is the elimination method that the player used most frequently. If the player's most frequently used elimination method was the Yakudza, this could lead to a very interesting ending. The reason that I'm willing to consider adding the Yakudza to the game is because most of the mechanics necessary to add him are already in the game. Friendship mechanics, text messages, phone menus, and kidnapping mechanics. After the delinquents are added to the game, and each of them can offer a task to Yandere-chan, adding the Yakudza would probably only require a trivial amount of work. You might be wondering, if the Yakudza has so many similarities to Info-chan, why even add him to the game? Wouldn't he be redundant? Allow me to repeat something that I mentioned earlier in the video. The purpose of the Yakudza would be to provide every type of service that Info-chan cannot provide. Yes, Yandere-chan would interact with the two of them in almost exactly the same way, but there would be no overlap whatsoever in the type of assistance that they offer. I really like the idea of adding this character to Yandere Simulator, because he was one of the first features ever suggested for the game, and because I think he sounds really cool. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm extremely hesitant to plan or promise new features at this point in time. He would only be added to the game if I could confirm that the feature would require very little time and very few assets to be implemented, and if the fanbase actually wants him. I'll put a poll in the video description so you can tell me whether or not you approve of this idea. But even if I'm certain that it won't take long to add him to the game, and even if the fanbase does want him, it's entirely possible that he won't be added to the game until after Osana is finished. Even if he's not guaranteed to be in the game, I just couldn't resist making a video about the subject, since the idea has been in my head for so long. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you for following the development of Yandere Simulator.